And with that, I would hand over the floor to, officially, Professor Strohschneider. And from now on, I'm in a listening mode, and you're the boss.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President, for the honor to invite us, for the honor to open your house for this very important endeavor. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, dear members of the strategic dialogue, the task that the President of the Commission has set us is by no means trivial. On the contrary, it's quite challenging. On the one hand, because the four main questions that will guide our dialogue encompass numerous and very complex and also controversial aspects. The perspectives of European farmers and rural communities are by no means uniform in economic terms. We will have to think very seriously about how the very differentiated forms of European agriculture can be related to planetary and ecological boundaries. Scientific and technological innovation in mechanical and genetic engineering, in digitization and agrochemicals will offer enormous opportunities, but at the same time will hardly be available without any risk, which will have to be shaped socially and politically. We will have to describe food security and nutrition quality in Europe in global contexts and trading systems, which are characterized by a plethora of rapidly changing tasks and geopolitical conflicts of interest. On the other hand, these issues are linked to an overarching goal, which the President has described as overcoming polarization in agricultural and environmental politics through our common dialogue, which she has described as reconciling, which is not a trivial word itself, which she has described as reconciling economic competitiveness and responsible climate, nature, and environmental protection. In all of this, it cannot be overlooked, and I therefore do not want even to conceal it. It cannot be overlooked that our mandate leads right into the middle of a comprehensive process of civilizational change. For this, the term Great Transformation became widely in use, and of course, such a massive transformation will not succeed without major conflicts. Such conflicts can be seen, for example, in the protests by farmers in numerous European countries right now, or in the youth climate movement, or in the apocalyptic semantics that are often prominent: farm death, climate death, species extinction. This is a sort of death semantics that dominates public discourse on our problem field. Major conflicts, which can also be seen in changes of society's attitudes towards agriculture, brought about by major structural and economic changes in agriculture and rural areas, brought about by public debates on environmental protection, nature conservation, climate mitigation, animal protection, and the economic prospects of farms. Major conflicts that can also be seen in the fact that debates about different nutritional styles are increasingly taking on the fervor of cultural battles. It is within this framework, which I only sketch out here in a few lines, that we want to try to develop a consensual draft, a common vision, a proposal for the further development, for the future development of European agricultural and food industry policies, a proposal that is convincing or at least acceptable to the various stakeholders, and that is not without any concrete political impact in the end. And let me express my great gratitude to all of you for embarking on this somewhat adventurous common journey over the next few months. This journey will take us through all kinds of shallows, and it is probably not at all risky to predict some of the areas of conflict in which we will find ourselves along the way. We will probably have to discuss how agriculture, food, nutrition from plants to meat and fish, trade, rural energy, rural environments, energy, and environmental policies, how these policies should actually be organized so that agricultural and environmental policy do not perceive each other in a win-lose constellation in which an environmental policy success is always an agricultural policy defeat, and vice versa. How these policies should be organized so that agricultural landscape is not decisive only for rural areas, but for our view on Europe and on the surface, the face of Europe, so that competition becomes a broad field, as it is increasingly important in the agricultural and food systems to balance quality and quantity competition and extend this not only to product quality, but also to process quality of food production. To shape these policies so that it does not exclusively promote expansion of farm units and fields or freezing structures and intensification and standardization of production forms or marketing standards and uniformity of regional agricultural structures, but that these policies rather develop resilient diversity of formats and types of agricultural production, from business models to crop rotation to the structural richness of the agricultural landscape in vital rural areas. How to shape these policies so that they make cost externalization, including the overuse of the commons, that they make cost externalization as difficult as possible and make re-internalization of external costs more likely. Of course, here, as in all other questions, the devil is in the detail. In the questions of balancing conflicting goals and conflicting interests, in the development of political interventions, in the adjustment of their intended effects and their unanticipated side effects, in administration, implementation, legal structures, impact monitoring, and so forth and so forth. We will presumably not be able to discuss all of these detailed questions that we come across on our adventure trip. And we certainly won't be able to entirely solve them at first hand. Nevertheless, I'm convinced that the strategic dialogue we are starting today, that it can succeed and that it can become a success for the future of European agriculture. To explain my confidence in this, at least a little, please allow me to make 4 brief comments on our prospects. First remark, most of you, unlike the chairman, have particular expertise in various issues relating to agriculture, food and environmental protection. Nevertheless, the dialogue is not an expert commission if by experts we mean neutral specialists without direct vested interests. Basically, as members of the dialogue, you do not have the sole mandate of being appointed ad personam by the President of the European Commission. Rather, you, the members, represent at the same time the organization to which you belong in a leading position and the interests that are organized in these organizations. The members are therefore not only subject to the obligation to provide factual justification for your statements, but also to justify them in terms of organizational policies. You must therefore be able to withstand the tensions arising from this, because only then does the strategic dialogue have a chance of success. If we can somehow break away from the traditions of previous battles, if all members are prepared to rethink the established positions of their respective organizations. I would like this to summarize in the following sentence. The logic of the strategic dialogue, as undeniably knowledgeable you all are, the logic of the strategic dialogue is not the pooling of technical expertise. The logic is the sensible social and political balancing of conflicting economic, ecological, and social interests, which all you have in a different weighting. I see us, if you like, as a forum for balancing these interests. And among other things, this also means we are not a day-to-day political monitoring body. Politics is going on while we convene. We are not a day-to-day political monitoring body that could be used to intervene in EU policy in the coming months or in the European election campaign. Rather, we are undertaking an open search movement for medium and long-term processes. And in this respect, it is not bad at all that at least the chairman does not already have the solution to all the problems in mind. Second remark, it is possible to balance diverging interests sensibly and fairly, even in particular difficult areas. And this does not require to entirely reinvent agri-environmental policies. There is a wealth of knowledge in science and also in administration that we can build upon. But it requires us to find conceptual pathways that we can agree on despite all the differences in interests. This will be easier if we do not concentrate on the individual, often ideologically exaggerated points of conflict. And by the way, ideology, as a wise Englishman said, is like bad breath, only the others have it. It will not be, or it will hard be, to find conceptual pathways it will be easier to find conceptual pathways if we concentrate on developing something like a systematic framework into which we then can categorize the individual issues and which enables us to reconciliate conflicting interests, not in each individual detail, but across the spectrum of issues. And this would make us able to, this would us enable to make the role of veto players more difficult in this round. The considerable challenge for the strategic dialogue, therefore, is to organize the balancing of positions and interests. And I think that we should try to do so for a medium time horizon, let's say 5 to 15 years, which mean more than the next Commission has to deal with, or 2 future multi-annual frameworks, so to say. And we should try to find a medium level of concretization for this. And by a medium level of concretization, I mean between 2 general formula compromises like do the good and avoid the evil, which we are easily would be able to agree on, but which remain politically irrelevant and inconsequential. between two general formula compromises on the one hand side and the incalculable number of detailed issues, of often extremely detailed issues, that can then only be dealt with in selective deals, which often lead into deadlock situations. I mean, all of you know these type of deals. Glyphosate ban 10, 15 years later, but flower strips by 7.50 meters instead of only 5.35 meters or so. This type of deals, of detailed deals, we will not be able to solve, but we will be able to develop a framework in which then even this type of deals could be solved by those responsible for it in a political and administrative way. We should do so on a medium time level and a medium level of concretization. We should do so in order to be able to formulate reasonable recommendations for a truly sustainable further development of agriculture, which can then also become politically impactful. Third remark, reconciling economic competitiveness with ecological responsibility in a social responsible agriculture within rural areas of the future. This is what the President has underlined before. If we want to take this seriously, and we should, then this means discussing how competitiveness can be achieved not against the protection of nature and the climate, e.g. through negative externalities, not against the protection of nature and climate, but by means of it, and vice versa. This means discussing how the protection of the environment and climate can be strengthened not at the expense of competitiveness, but with its help. We must therefore not play competitiveness and the preservation of nature, playing them off against each other, but make them useful for each other. And that means, I would assume, that we need to identify development paths for a future agriculture that are likewise microeconomically viable on the level of farms and companies, macroeconomically beneficial, ecologically responsible, and therefore also acceptable to those affected and socially feasible. To formulate this crucial point once again in a different way, we have to take into account that economic, ecological, and social viability, as well as social acceptance, is needed at the same time. These criteria, the three dimensions of sustainability according to the SDGs, these three dimensions of sustainability do not form a ranking order. They are of equal importance. Otherwise, there would be no need for a strategic dialogue because politics could derive its solutions directly from the ranking order of these normative frameworks, so to say. And these criteria are associated with a wealth of conflicting of objectives, factual differences of opinion, conflicts of interest, and also conflicts of power, of course. Fourth remark. I'm firmly convinced that we can overcome the many challenges facing the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture in Europe. However, I am really convinced that we will only be able to do so if we succeed in creating a common space of trust and confidentiality. This would be a space in which I can recognize that opposing positions may also have reasonable grounds. A space in which it is not a defeat to try an argument once that turns out not to be of any use in the further discussion. A space of trust and confidentiality in which we are all able to take the perspective of the other side, in which we are all able to once and again take a step back from our own position so that we realize that our own views are not entirely free of internal contradictions and tensions. The others do see these internal contradictions and intentions anyhow. What I am saying here may seem a little pathetic at first. Basically, ladies and gentlemen, however, it is simply what we all have to constantly demand of each other in open pluralistic societies and liberal democracies. It's an everyday undertaking in pluralistic democracies to be able to take the position of the other. I don't want to say much more at the beginning. Let's start it. Let's get started this adventurous endeavor. And if after we have exchanged our basic positions, if we would get to a point today where we are able to formulate the very first perspectives that are compatible with my position and of which I can also assume at the same time that everyone else would perhaps going along with them. If we would meet that point even today, then we would have made the best possible start in our collaboration that you might imagine. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Handing back to you.
No. So